you want
It's just the
hashtag fandom is my fandom. Oh, yeah, season 1 too. Yeah.
Fandom is my fandom. What people call
If we need a specific hashtag for Tumblr, then fandom is my fandom SDCC might work.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You want to get specific.
Since we have a lot of panelists and a lot to cover, even though people are still coming in, we're going to get started. So thanks so much to all of you for coming today. This is, for some of us, our second annual-ish. Fandom is our fandom-ish panel. And we have new people on the panel this year, and I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves in about 140 characters or 140 words. So we're going to start with Betsy.
Hi, I can't count to 140. I just let the app do that for me. But I'm a law professor. I teach intellectual property law. I'm the legal chair for the Organization for Transformative Works, which is why I'm here. I'm a fan myself. I'm a Sherlockian, and I have a small legal practice, but mostly what I like to do is think about fans and fan works and law.
Elizabeth?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm a journalist. I used to write mostly about books. I've written for The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Guardian, The New Republic. But I've been reading fan fiction for the last 20 years. So in the last couple of years I started writing about fandom, and I have a column with The New Statesman, which is a British magazine, about fan culture, and I'm a staff at The Millions, where I also write about fan stuff and fan fiction.
Aaron?
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Levitz. I work at
Mike Closer.
I don't know which, I've got so many choices. Everyone wants me to use their microphone. Hi, I'm Aaron Levitz. I work at Wattpad. At Wattpad, I do many fun things, part of which is helping deal with the amazing fans and fandom that goes on Wattpad, and a lot of that interfacing with the traditional entertainment industry, whether it's movies, TV, the digital space, whether it's fandoms and all those amazing things. So I still have 2 words at the end.
Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda. I am a librarian and content team member at Tumblr. Previously, I was at Notre Dame, where I studied subcultures. Fandom is my specialty. All throughout my work, I got my MLIS from Rutgers, where I convinced them to let me study fandom as well.
Meredith?
I'm Meredith, and my job title is anthropologist. I work at a company called Zephyr that, among other things, does rights management for most of the major film, TV, music, and sports companies. And I study fandom and subculture for major media companies and brands.
Flourish?
Hey, I'm Flourish. Many of you probably know me from the Harry Potter fandom from like 1998. I was a lot smaller then, now I'm large, and I managed to become a professional fan basically. So I have a company called Chaotic Good, which I consult with people about franchise building, that is like planning out sort of what all of the different things they're going to have, from merchandise to video games to everything else. And why?
Migrating poster.
Anyway, yeah. So,
are we in the right room?
I think they moved to that side. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so I do that, and it's fun. By the migrating poster.
Stop the person without poster.
I want it back.
I feel like we're suddenly in a panel AU. Jules?
This is the moving poster AU. My name is Jules Wilkinson. I'm obviously not from around here. I suppose in fandom, people may know me as Missy Jack or at SuperWiki. I run the Supernatural Wiki for the Supernatural fandom. I like tentacle porn. Across fandoms, I'm a multi-shipper. Any orifice, any tentacle. I have no professional qualifications related to being a fan. In fact, being a fan is simply broke, and I only have 1 kidney and half a lung. Hashtag SDCC.
So So thank you all for coming today, and thanks to all of you for coming today. We're going to get to questions in about 20 minutes before 6 o'clock. And hopefully we'll have some interesting questions from the audience. They asked me to make sure everybody knows that you can just stand up in your seat when we get to questions. No, we're not going to have a mic to pass around, and just enunciate so we can hear you.
Or raise your hand if you can't stand up.
Oh, yes, or raise your hand.
Communicate in some way.
So one of our proposed panelists wasn't able to make it today. Lev Grossman is not going to be until tomorrow. So I have a couple sentences from him circa 2011 to sort of look back at fandom back then versus the world that we're discussing right now. It goes like this. The characters belong to the person who created them or to the fans who love them so passionately that they spend their nights and weekends laboring to extend those characters' lives for free. There's a division here, a geological fault line that looks small on the surface but runs deep into our culture, and the tectonic plates are only moving farther apart. Is art about making up new things or about transforming the material that's out there? So basically, that was how fandom was described in 2011. Obviously, 2015, we've had the tectonic plates moving even further, but in all sorts of different directions. I don't think that they've necessarily all moved further apart or all closer together. So, from all of your perspectives, what do you think about where fandom is right now on the crossroads between organic fan communities, fan-created content, and the different websites that exist to support and serve and interact with fans? Betsy, you've been doing this since before 2011.
I literally came out of the womb a Sherlockian. Both my parents are Sherlockians, so I really inherited it. So I've been involved in fandom in one way or another for my entire life, and for the first bunch of years, fandom was an entirely offline pursuit because there was no such thing as online. Online didn't exist until the mid-90s for most people. And so fandom, as I knew it, was a bunch of old men in live meetups and conventions and conferences. And they wrote scholarly articles about Sherlock Holmes. That was what I knew as fandom. That all changed in the 90s when fandom collided with women. Women started to be, and in fact, that started in the 70s with their groups of live meetings and fanzines. I don't mean to imply that women weren't the origins of fandom, they certainly were. But my world was old men, and then it was old women, and now it's everybody. And I think that's really, the world has changed because it's become so much easier for people to communicate with each other and find each other, and that's been just fantastic.
Elizabeth?
I guess I think from my perspective as a, as a books journalist, I remember maybe 5 years ago, I told a coworker, I work for a fancy magazine that I probably shouldn't name, not to indict anyone, and I told her that I had spent the weekend writing fan fiction. It was Torchwood fan fiction, but I didn't mention that part. And she said, "Don't say that word in this office," And I was just like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so embarrassed." And now when I talk about fan fiction with these people in publishing and magazines, they want to buy me lunch. And I think that the big change in that realm comes from money, from people seeing particularly 50 Shades of Grey, and all these publishers go, "Oh, there must be more of that," but they don't really. I don't know if anyone here works in book publishing, but there's not really a full understanding. They can only see the end result. They can't see the organic growth, and so that's what I'm trying to show people with my journalism. So.
Aaron?
So from our perspective, my perspective, so Wattpad, we have about 40 odd million users coming every month, and 20–30% of that is around fan fiction. And what that said to us, we didn't build Wattpad to be an amazing fan fiction. Like when our founders founded the company, they didn't go, "This is going to be one of the biggest places for fan fiction in the world." What they built was an amazing place to share stories. And then the fan fiction came. And we all scrambled to go, "Oh my God, fan fiction happening, we better be really good at this really quickly." And thankfully we hire amazing people like Emily sitting there, who's really smart and helps us with that. But what it showed us was a couple things, that mobile has completely changed again fan fiction for a lot of reasons. First of all, you can be writing anytime, but you can be reading anytime. There's this inane privacy that you can walk around with in your hands and read whatever you want, no matter where you want the tentacles to go. Pretty much anywhere you want to, and it's still your private piece of fandom. So you can be connected to fandom 24 hours a day. But you're also seeing fandom spark where, they're back to what Betsy had said, when females took over fandom, you're now seeing it really go to everywhere. You're seeing, boys writing Minecraft fan fiction about their levels. You're seeing Pokemon fan fiction is massive, and that's very male focused. So what technology has really brought to fandom these days is the ability for everyone to be part of it. And people would never even use the term fandom. Like, I grew up, I wrote X-Men stuff before the cartoon, just gonna say, but 90s cartoon too. I didn't know what fandom was, but now even you have the ability to learn this nomenclature, this archival knowledge that these other fandoms have, and I think that's really what we get to see a lot.
Thinking about fandom specifically in the context of Tumblr, Tumblr is really the place where you go to share your passions. Like Facebook, you've got your friends. Twitter, it's like your serious journalist people, your news. Tumblr is where you go to share the things that you love and like be so pumped about the things that you love. And it allows communities to bond about these things, and they don't have to be in the traditional sense of TV or movies or music. Like, there's sync fandom is huge. People love cool syncs. There's hidden room fandom, people who just like to reblog photos of hidden rooms. Finance Tumblr, surprisingly huge. If you like stocks, Tumblr is the place for you. Like, you can find a community for anything there. And
But we need to build the lawyer Tumblr.
yeah, we gotta work on lawyer Tumblr. There's definitely librarian Tumblr. We have the hashtag Tumblarians, which is really cool. Shout out to all my librarians. And fans really have the chance to change the conversation. There's so many threads where people will post a text post and someone will reblog it and draw fan art, and then someone else will reblog it and write fan fiction. A great example of that is Miss Officer and Mr. Truffles.
Yes.
It was just a photo of an officer and a bear, and someone drew some fan art, made some fan fiction, made a cartoon, and things really had the chance to grow and build because of reblogging and tags and being able to find the people that share things you love.
I mean, it's changed since I started at the company I work at. We do a lot of rights management, and major media companies were really hesitant to have that out there in bidding, and it's since changed with the concepts of earned media, and I think social media has really changed fandom because it's really brought to the forefront of the minds of powers that be and brands with money that fans can actually show up in places and say, I count, and there's a way to count me. So the way that I see it changing is suddenly now you can say, oh, well, this is exactly how many ship videos for Harry Potter there are on YouTube, and exactly how big X, Y, and Z community is to stand up and say, we're here, and it's not about breadth. You can measure depth and devotion is important, and now we're starting to see companies really understand what that means and trying to figure out how to make that work for them.
I think what a lot of this comes down to is money. And I mean, you said that first, Elizabeth, but I think it's really true and I want to underline it. And actually, I'm really happy about that. So when I got involved in fan fiction at first, in fandom at first, it was this thing, it was totally hidden, it was secret. And I think that part of the reason it's not secret now is that, like, you can make a living doing it, and therefore you don't have to be ashamed of it. And I think that's sort of sick about our culture, that like you find it shameful to do something that like you can't make money from. But I think it's true. People would always say, like, why are you writing fanfic? Don't you ever want to like write original stories and make money with them someday? Like, well, sorry to say. I mean, it's also, so one of the things that I'd like to see in the future, actually, to take this a little bit further down, is right now I think a lot of the sort of space around fanfic, when people talk about it, fanfic, fanvids, etc., is that like, well, maybe you're going to break out and you're going to become like a YA author or whatever. But I think that that's actually like, when you see there's like a generation of people, myself and many people on this panel included, not all, because not everybody wants that job, right? But there's a lot of people who are coming from fandom, women especially, who are coming from fandom and going out and doing all sorts of different things, not necessarily being a YA writer or being a star from a YouTube, but also like explaining fandom to people, working in social media and PR. You know, even I would love to see more scriptwriters come out of fandom, because I think that that's a central skill that we hone when we write fanfic. And I think that opening up that, and I hope the next move is going to go from like, here are some fans that we can, I don't want to say exploit, because I don't think that's really what I mean, who we can look at. No, but I mean like an audience that we can figure out what they want better and like therefore make more money off of them because we're giving them what they want better, which I think is like, that's a good thing. I actually sort of want to give people money for things I like, you know, that's cool. But I want it to go a step beyond that, and I hope that the next step is going to be a true appreciation for the talents that can be developed through fandom.
Can I jump in? Just to cut in just 1 second? I mean, we're seeing that in spades happen on Wattpad. You know?
Yeah.
There's someone in this audience who's done pretty good, who started with fan fiction sitting over there. Her name's Anna Todd, if you don't know her. She's amazing. She wrote this thing called After. You should know. But we're seeing this every day where the traditional industry, the traditional entertainment industry, no longer looks at the title or, you know, if this is a Teen Wolf fan. They don't look at that anymore. They say, is this a storyline that's amazing? Is this a concept I can take? And I don't care if it started as Teen Wolf. I might turn this into a historical World War II fiction when I put it to screen. But I can't tell you every day I have a different person from Hollywood calling me saying, who is this person? I want to talk to this person. So that path is it's not the future, it's happening every day. It really comes down to how fast can we hook up our writers with the right people in Hollywood.
Yeah, the same thing happens on Tumblr with fan art. Sorry to jump in, but we see our artists get to work with really cool people. A lot of the Welcome to Night Vale fan art is done by Kate Leff, and I think they found her on Tumblr. Like, I've connected people from companies to fan artists. It's really cool to be able to do that for someone.
So I suppose I wanted to pick up on two things. One is, I suppose, the fans' perspective of some of the platforms that are represented here. And the great thing about fandom, and you know, I predate the internet. My first fanfic was about the Patty Duke show. And so I've seen fandom move from, you know, rodeo fanzines through the internet, from the message boards through LiveJournal. I'm still on LiveJournal. Me and George Martin. You know, and then there was this bit of shift into Dreamwidth, but no one went there, and then Tumblr came along. But the thing about fans is, we will find whatever's out there and then we will make it work for us. And I think there's a sense now that some of these platforms are going, well, okay, this is our audience, this is our client, if you like. And it's often fandom who comes up with the ways of using that platform that have never been, as you were saying with Wattpad and with Tumblr, never envisaged in the beginning. But we come along and we're like, this is what we want to do. We need better tags for this, we need to be able to do this. You know, the structure of how fan communities formed on LiveJournal is different than on Tumblr, purely because the architectures of the system are different. It's not better or worse, but they're different. And I think that's exciting because there's now a greater diversity of those platforms from the old days of it was just a message board. And for me, that's great because it means a diversity of access to a diversity of communities. And you know, let's not be utopic about it. There's still a lot of gatekeeping. There's still a lot of lack of diversity and voice for people in fandom. But the more platforms we have, the more space there are for those voices to try and get heard. And for me, that's really, really, because fandom's about community. The other thing is on the right side of things. I tried to run I did run a fanfic reading event at a queer festival in 1999. No one wanted to read because they were so scared that Warner Brothers, or actually George Lucas in person, was going to come to our little queer bookshop in Melbourne and knock on the door and sue us for reading our spuffy fanfic. And now I can run a fanfic reading event, and I'm sure most of you probably come from cities where comics do erotic fanfic readings, and that shift in the idea of, I think, from the powers that be, that this is a threat and removed from seeing it as, in some cases, a product that we can use, whether it's for a movie or a book, but also us as an audience. Just because we're making stuff doesn't mean we're out to destroy you.
Although, I mean, that
Sometimes we are.
yeah, although that can be as well, right? I mean, so I've worked with a bunch of people. One of my, some of the people that I've worked with have worked on major television shows, and in one particular case that I'm trying not to name because I don't want to embarrass anybody, I was talking with a person who had sort of built their website, and they were like, but how do we, you know, when we open this fan fiction section on our website, how do we get people to post there? Like, we really want them to come. And I was like, well, why do you want them there? You've got this huge fandom, like, who are posting fan fiction all over. Like, why are you not, like, and he went, no, because we need the views. We want them to come to our site because they're getting all of those views, and, like, we need those views. And I'm going, that's not how it works. Like, no one's going to feel comfortable, like, posting their incest fanfic on a site that is owned by, like, that's just not going to happen. He's like, but we're cool with it.
The site is almost there. Underage incest tentacle porn.
Hand to God, I myself have written and shown to many people a eternal Fred and George incest generator. You can look it up online, and it's going to be published in a scholarly, collection of literature soon, which is amazing. But my point being, though, right? So it was just this funny thing where it was it was a really sort of enclosing the commons kind of a move that they were trying to make. I don't think they saw it that way, but it was not. There's still this divide.
I mean, I think that it's also a lot of companies are thinking about where do I have to be looking?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge question, is like, well, if they're not going to, underserved markets serve themselves, so how and where are they going, and how can you participate in it in a way that is respectful but also helps everybody?
And I also think that there's still, even though organizations like the OTW and what I've done with FDF Copyright have tried really, really hard to be fair use wizards and make sure that people understand that generally their fan fiction, their fan art, their cosplay, their fan films fall under the ambit of fair use, which I think Betsy is itching to explain. But even if it falls under fair use, that doesn't necessarily make people feel comfortable posting it on the website, especially where the powers that be's website contains the terms of use that either takes control of it or gives them certain licenses to it, more than just the license of we can, modify, edit, and show this however we want, so that we can make it mobile simple and, change the page after every, 200 words or something like that. But there's so much misunderstanding about what terms of use do and what fair use is, and fair use changes every so often, and I think part of that is why people are just not comfortable putting their stuff out where the powers that be are going to be able to control all of it. However, when a contest comes along or a challenge comes along or a certain hashtag comes along, they may be willing to put one thing or three things into that particular zone while keeping the rest of it separate from it. So I know Betsy wants to talk a little bit about why the growth of the fair use parabola has really made an impact on why fans are more comfortable and less shameful and
Yeah, I want to actually pick up on a couple of things people have said, because there's a fascinating sort of contradiction, I think, about how the money works in all of this. There's this huge potential for money, but then there's also this interesting enclosing the commons thing going on. And so I want to talk about how law influences this and how this influences the law. It's definitely but the law is influencing what fans do, and the fans are definitely influencing what the law does. Hooray. So pastiches existed for a really long time. People have been writing commercial fan works since Arthur Conan Doyle was writing the original Sherlock Holmes canon. Like, this has been happening for a long time. But a bunch of things have changed since that era that have, I think, made people more comfortable with doing it, people more comfortable using their real names doing it. Part of that is that the technological platforms to bring people together are better. And a lot of that, I think, is that people understand the law better, and the law has gotten better. I think there's now a lot of comfort with the idea that at least non-commercial fan works are pretty easily defined as fair use. There really isn't a legal problem with non-commercial fan work. So what do I mean by fair use?
What do we mean by commercial?
Well, I'll get there. Let's back the bus up though with what do I mean by fair use. Under United States law, which is the one that governs most of the properties we're dealing with here, partly because it's the one that lasts the longest, it is infringement to make a derivative work, to make a work based on something, except it's not infringement to make a fair use. Fair use is a kind of derivation that transforms the original in meaning or purpose, that takes only part of the original, or at least they consider how much of the original it takes, consider whether it's a market replacement for the original, and they consider whether it's commercial, non-commercial works are favored. Now, all of those things, transformative, commercial, amount taken, these are super vague terms, which I think helps a lot. I think here vague may actually be good in some ways. There was a time when vague was bad because everyone was scared of vague. Now I think vague is good because people have, through technology, been emboldened by that vagueness. And then the rights holders have seen the enormous potential of this, and courts have looked at circumstances where even people have sold fan works now and said, yeah, this is transformative. This transforms the meaning. It only takes part of the original. We're going to support this. So I do want to come back to non-commerciality, though. It's very difficult to define. And of course, there's ad-supported, there's actually selling the work, there's not selling the work at all, but sort of using it as a springboard to something else. So far, the law defines commercial as selling the thing for money. That's so far where we are. But that can change. And so it's a little unpredictable. I think when Flourish was talking a lot about selling fan works, and it's sort of come in a few places about selling fan works, I think that's a legally slightly scarier place than giving them away. But there are a lot of great things that we get from giving them away. And when the OTW did research about, people wrote in about what Fandom gave them. A lot of the things that Fandom gave them were because of the non-commercial nature. Right? They didn't need to find a market for their work. They could just put it out there, and they could find their community, and they could build those skills, and they could build critical thinking and editing and technical skills as they learned to vid and make fan games and draw. And that non-commercial nature, I think, ends up being an important part of fan culture so that people can go and get hired doing these things that they've learned to do through fandom. So I think there's actually a lot of symbiosis between this non-commercial world and the commercial world that doesn't require selling the fan works if you're still scared of that. Okay, now I'll get off my soapbox.
Can I just interrupt?
Yes.
This is not disagreeing with you, but I feel that there starts to be a tier coming to the culture where the emphasis, even you're talking about non-commercial side of fandom, the skills you learn and what you do, that you can then go on and, you know, a lot of us are in fandom not with that in mind. We don't want, all I want is to make friends and wank.
Oh yeah.
But I'm saying is
that's what I want out of it too.
But there's a lot of, there's a sense that some of that validation or legitimizing comes from, you know, either you can sell it, but even if you're not selling it, you're learning good things. And for me,
but I think that's why I agree, but I think that industry has come to accept and be enthusiastic about it because of that learning good things thing. That may not be why fans are doing it. I hope it's not why fans are doing it.
And I suppose I'm just sitting here thinking, I don't really care what industry thinks about what I do. It's really nice that you run platforms for me to play on, but I suppose it's that what place does this have in a fan conversation?
Right.
So,
Fair enough.
you know, and we might get some ideas from the audience later about that.
But I think that you also, like, you do like that you can now have a, like, I like that you can now have, anyway, I like it, that you can now have a fandom, you can have a fanfic reading, right? I mean, and I think that that's the problem, is that I think that this has been part of why it's become, in the wider culture, more accepted, but unfortunately those aren't the values. Like, I mean, certainly I didn't come into fandom thinking that I was like, this was gonna be my career move, guys. Like, and I still don't really like that. I have rules against working on things in fandoms that I actually like because I like them too much and I don't want to work in them, you know? Like, that's wrong. So I appreciate that. I just think that it's a tough, like, that's...
No, I'm just questioning.
Yeah.
I suppose I feel a bit out of place with people who are working on these platforms and who are involved in the legal side of things, and I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm interested from a fan's perspective. There's a lot of us that conversation doesn't come up, other than, you know, occasionally, gee, I wonder if I could make $1 million selling, you know,
I know,
my Winsay Stokers.
Yes. From our standpoint, the majority of people who are writing, I mean, the amount of times you will see a tweet at Wattpad, I just wrote my first fanfic. And you'll go follow that fanfic, and that fanfic will get 100 reads, okay? And that person is through the roof. 100 people read my fanfic. That is the most important thing in the world to me. It's not that they have any urge to ever take it any further than that. It might be the only fanfic they ever write. They did it because they love that.
Yeah.
Now, we have fan fictions with 10 million reads, 100 million reads, 1 billion reads. That happens on Wattpad. And I think the biggest thing is there is a path that if you find this is what you love, you can go further with it. But a lot of people just want to be creative. They want to create love for something they love, and this is their way of doing it. And that 100 reads, even 10 reads. Like if someone gets, I have a story that has 200 reads, I'm freaking proud of it. It's like amazing that 200 people care what I wrote, and that is the majority, and not a majority by a little bit, like 98% of the people on Wattpad. That's what they can publish writers are doing.
And I think it's important, I think it's important to sort of look at the past of fandom, because there are still communities where people can organically grow not their skills, but their interest and their fandom and their love. And you know, this is one of the things that we've been talking about with the Harry Potter Alliance and the FanWorks Taught Me hashtag. And the importance of just
play, and I think it's really easy to get caught in this trap of monolithic fandom as a singular idea, that when I say fandom, I have an idea of what that means, but somebody else can have an idea of what that means, and it's very different from mine. And I think that within fandom, it's really, really diverse, and so you have all sorts of different cultures. For instance, like, some people migrate and move through, oh, I'm a fanfiction writer, I'm a fanfiction reader, I'm going to go on this like vid bender and totally ignore the fact that I can read it all. And it's transient and it's diverse, but we say fandom, and I think really we mean fandoms.
That's another thing I really love about Tumblr is like you start following all these communities. Like I really love Homestuck. Homestuck goes on hiatus. What are the Homestucks into now? And like I think that's how Welcome to Night Vale really blew up, because the fandom was on hiatus. What do we do? Let's find something else that's spooky and cool. And the communities just kind of build out. Like Hannibal did the same thing. It came out during a hiatus. And kids just got so into it, not kids, just everyone got so into it, and just the communities are so, they flow in and out and overlap, and you can follow, like my dashboard is intense, and I always find a new fandom from someone that I didn't even know liked the thing.
I just want to jump in for a second about sort of how different platforms and the fact that some platforms are run by rights holders and others are run by companies and others are run by independent volunteer organizations like the OTW. I think one of this is, sorry, it's what I do. But one of the questions that comes up is, who is making money from this? When when there's money way behind something, there are, I think, more questions about who it's benefiting. Those questions are often answered in very happy ways, but not always. And I think as fandom and the many fandoms and many types of fandoms hit the mainstream, we may want to sort of stop and take note of the fact that money breeds censorship. Once somebody is making decisions about payment, they're also making some decisions about content. And so I think one of the really great things about fan culture, fan creativity as a volunteer pursuit is that it creates the most diversity possible. And once you start funneling it, fewer flowers bloom. And so that's my personal view. Obviously, the people here who make money indirectly from fandom may really disagree with me, but that's what we want.
I think you're right, and that's what I was trying to say about there being a tension between this, right? Because I agree that volunteer organization, like, yes, that allows less censorship and so forth, but on the other hand, there's also an access question, which is that, you know,
and volunteer organizations can get pretty censory too, especially when a group decides that this is going to be how they control this portion of fandom or that portion of fandom, and when that happens, you can have, you know, conflicts between fans who want different things from their fandom and from their content and from their creativity. I have one last question, and then I want to get to the audience questions. Sort of dovetailing off of what Betsy said, so we're going to jump over to Elizabeth, and Erin, your answer can go in this, I'm sure. What do each of you think has been the best representation of interaction between powers that be and fans, fandoms, fan creativity?
No, here's someone else.
Okay.
Oh, I have to come up with a good one?
Otherwise, I gotta answer the
start.
censorship thing.
I mean, I honestly, it's been very interesting listening to this, and I've done maybe
Yeah,
back
you covered
against,
some of the worst.
again, yeah, like I mostly read about the worst, but like to push back against you guys, not necessarily, I mean, obviously I love Tumblr, and I like, you know, YouTube and Wattpad. I mean, I'm sure I love it, but, you know,
After we share the microphone, that's how
I'm
you
so sorry. You know, and this goes back to what you're saying too, and I think that's related. You know, the kind of fandom that I'm coming from, and maybe a lot of you guys too, is just very traditional. You never want the creators to see any of what you're doing. There's a fourth wall does not mean, you know, the fourth wall means something completely different in fandom, right? You know, and it's like, coming from a place of like, if fan fiction for me is transformative and it pushes back and it challenges and it says these dudes are getting together, you know, and like I don't want Stephen Moffat to say that's cool. Like I don't need that, you know.
No one needs.
But you know what I mean? I have a lot of trouble, and I think I have a different perspective from you guys, and obviously I have a different set of ethical challenges as a journalist, you know, trying to exist in the same space and writing in the same place as all my fan friends who are not making any money, and I'm making money for the same sort of things. But I have a lot of trouble with it. I have trouble adjusting to it. I know that I keep writing about how the world has changed and we need to get used to it because these platforms are here and can see what we're doing. I don't know if you guys, I kind of changed the question, I'm sorry, but this is what I do.
I need to talk briefly about Supernatural because it is a bit of a special place. In the very beginning, it's a show that's been very postmodern and writing / fans on the show. It's had a number of representations now on the show. My site, which is a wiki-based site, is totally created by fandom. It's not organised at all. It is an open site, anyone can come on and edit it. It has lots of porn on it as well as very useful things. What is not useful? It's a canonical site as well. And we have the people on the show who now use that site created by fandom to make the show. And So on top, like it's layer upon layer of meta, it does your head in if you're in the fandom. Yeah, you know, the writers are very clear, they can't read fanfic, but they love the idea of transformative works. I think it's, part of it is a lot of them come from comics fandom, and also TV writing is a bit like writing fanfic. You take on someone else's creations and write stories about them.
Well, and a lot of TV writers started in fandom in one way or another, and I think the best reactions are when they say, like, there's fan works out there, they're gonna happen, let them go, just let them happen. And I think that's happening more and more.
Yeah, and just to go back to the good experiences with the platform, there are two really great experiences I've seen on Tumblr with creators interacting with fans. The first one, I'm going to kill the pronunciation of his last name, but Brian Konietzko, Legend of Korra, after the finale, he made this really long, beautiful post on Tumblr acknowledging Korrasami and just talking about it, and it was in the space where the fans were. And he brought this really insightful, feelings-driven post right to the fans in a place where they can respond and reblog and participate in that conversation. And then Doctor Who, like, they know everything that goes on Tumblr, and they put in the little nod in the episode when they're like, oh, I'm just looking at Tumblr, and like, it's just this really nice, like, we see you, we know you're there, we're just gonna let you do your thing, we're gonna reblog to your Tumblr, and like, as powers that be, we're just gonna say hi. I think it's sweet.
Can we give the audience some? I know we've only got a few minutes left, but we're talking about voices. I think we should give somebody else.
Unfortunately, we've literally only got 2 or 3 minutes
Sarah,
left.
Sarah wants to say one more something back there.
30 seconds.
I'd rather hear from them.
Yeah, we see it.
I wasn't really sure what I was going to come into with like coming into this panel and listen to you guys talk, and I have no problem, okay, with people like making money off of fandom, and like I think it's really exciting, and there's so many like opportunities. But the one thing I think none of you really, you kind of close, but you never quite got to the point of like fandom as a safe space.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with turning it super corporate. Or not super corporate at all. Is because fandom is a safe space, and it's a generational safe space where like generations of fans can come together and like critique one another and like pass down like lore and mythology within the fandom itself, depending on how old the fandom is. And so like, and then you have like groups that like, yeah, I mean it's so diverse and like it's like LGBT and like race and so many different things, but like when it gets corporate, you lose a lot of that. And when it gets corporate, it gives too many people an opportunity to come in it.
Yeah. But can I don't know if you guys are familiar with the UC Berkeley scandal that happened earlier this year.
Yes.
And one thing that was really interesting about for anyone who doesn't know, basically it was a student-led course at UC Berkeley. It was just a for fun class, and they picked a bunch of fics and
Didn't ask permission.
they didn't ask permission, which, I mean, so this can get complicated, but the problem specifically was they said to leave critical comments, which there's a lot of people are like, oh, it's always been like this, that you don't leave any, which isn't true.
That's not true.
You know, so it just depends on where you, like you said, like not all fandom is, there's, anyway, the point is, people got really angry. And there was a lot of rhetoric about fandom being a safe space. And that rang really false for me because A, I see some of the most crazy town things in fandom, right? Like, it's not safe to me. Like, I stopped talking in my fandom because I'm scared that someone's gonna, tell me to die. Like, I like it as an idea, but I just don't think it exists anymore.
But it is important to keep a multi-platform world for fandom and not have it all be on sites where the powers that we can.
Journalism fandom still exists.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Okay, you had a question.
Not so much a question, it's more of an overall statement. I think coming here, I've really learned a lot about being secure in your fandom and all. And I can evidently attest to that. I mean, I'm more than secure in my fandom. It's the Great Mouse Detective. That's my biggest fandom. I have my own website for all of my stories and my characters, and a lot of them are even based or modeled after characters and other things I get my inspiration from. Plus, I also have a DeviantArt, a Tumblr, a fanfiction.net, Twitter, etc. So, yes.
I kind of wanted to sort of bring it together because I sort of found that at the very beginning we were talking about how it used to be people who weren't in the fandom would say, why aren't you writing real fiction? Why aren't you selling real fiction? But now somehow we've come in this huge loop over the course of about 15 or 20 years, thanks to Icy or E.L. James, whatever she calls herself now, and because now fan fiction is out there, but somehow it has come around to the exact same thing of, so why haven't you sold your fan fiction? why aren't you doing real writing? It's just got a different name on it now, and I don't know where you go with that, or how you want, as things get more and more involved.
That's a media thing more than an actuality.
Yeah.
I mean, we get to survey millions of writers every day, and again, I'll say it again, 98% of them don't ask that question of the people they read, don't want to do it as a writer. It's being covered by mainstream
But
media.
they are doing it as a writer.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are, but a lot of them are writing just to write. And
Yeah, they're still writers.
It's mainstream media's picked up that fan fiction can be a business, so we hear a whole lot more about it.
Wait,
Doesn't
I
everybody-
apologize. Did I overhear that in saying it's not writing?
No, I
I'm
didn't
sorry,
say
I
that.
was hearing.
Sorry, you said, you talked about people writing, you talked about writers as if they were different than people who write fanfic.
No, I just said writers for the sake of writing. Not any kind of writer for the sake of writing, not trying to be public.
I mean, I think what it comes down to is the conversation in the media right now. Fandom is really sexy, and fandom is struggling with that identity shift of going from being very private and very behind closed doors with like-minded people to being sexy and having attention drawn to fandom and having fan fiction read either in really positive ways or in really negative ways on television, and having individuals
them to be entirely separate beasts. And they're like, yeah, I write for a living and I write for fun, and it is what it is, and they don't care. And you sort of find out at a certain point, you're like, oh, well, I know somebody in fandom, and I also know that they write professionally. And
I think the mainstream media,
Advertising and that, and get to the point of harassment because they cannot come to the concept that you would run a site that gets 1 million hits a month and not want to monetize it. Like, they cannot conceive of why you would do that.
And this is actually this is like the major argument that I have with people in the industry, is being like, no, you don't understand, they don't want you. Go away.